Hello, this is Edna White. I am so glad you're with me today. Well, I have something for you today. I want to talk to you about racial gaslighting. I know we hear the word gaslighting all the time. We really do. We get bombarded online about gaslighting for the mental health part of it. We get notices and newsletters about gaslighting, and even in the workplace, we get information about gaslighting at work. But I want to talk to you about something that's very subtle. For instance, you've been accused of playing the race card. You ever heard that? Or you're told to lighten up or not be so emotional. The chances are that you're hearing that is that you are part or being part of racial gaslighting. But before I start with all of that, I want to get to the basics of what gaslighting is. And we've heard it through the psychological background. Mental health it's a form of psychological manipulation where a person's statements can cause you to second guess your own memories and perceptions of reality. In its milder form, gaslighting can lead to an unequal power dynamic that's often subtle or too subtle to notice. But at its worst, this toxic behavior can escalate to mind control and psychological abuse. For example, when your partner um, is calling you out and hurting you with things that he or she is saying, they might deny that there was things that was even said, like "You're crazy. You imagine that. That's not real. You were sleeping. It was a vision." Things like that. You didn't see what you saw. you know, and that may even upset you and rattle your cage a little bit. Like, wait, did I really see that? Am I really crazy? Those things are hurtful. And if they don't get checked, they can have long term effects on you in your mental stage and your emotional health. Exactly. It'll make you anxious and depressed and a whole lot of other things that are going on. So, how do you experience it at work? Well, you can be told by a superior, a manager, a supervisor that what you're saying doesn't really matter, or not to be spoken to at all about something that matters to you. So, now what is racial gaslighting? And I really have been experiencing this at my job. Um, and it's a form of emotional abuse that hinges on making a victim doubt their own sanity and reality as it particularly relates to their race or issues of racism. So, in other words, it's a unique kind of gaslighting that causes people of color to question their own experiences with racism. I could truly say that researchers are really looking into this because it's even through what we've been going through it with appointing the judge. Normalizing this white supremacy is basically manipulation, and we need to combat that issue. It also brings about the question from the white supremacist attitude is what you're really experiencing, are you really overreacting? Are you misinterpreting things? Everything? Are you really misinterpreting things? Today, I'm going to just share a couple of things with you. I'm not going to get too deep into it, but I know from some of the experiences that I have been going through when working in the community, working as an advocate, being politically connected, working with those individuals in the community, working with the homeless, working in the homeless and housing industry, working as a coach or a performance coach with those to provide them a full life, I've seen examples, I've heard examples of many occasions of racial gaslighting. So, for instance, the movement All Lives Matter. Ugh, that's really weaponizing the real issue of racism, and it's subtly trying to disqualify what Black Lives Matter so that you can get your mind off of that, what the real issue is, and get it on, oh no, all lives matter. But the movement, the real movement is Black Lives Matter, and it should stand firm. Criticisms about being a public liar or being two races at once, and how can you be true to one? Um, are you playing the race card now? Kind of issue on the Black side, because you want to be in the movement. Things like that are really racial gaslighting. When it comes to everyday experiences, it can be tricky to recognize when you're being racially gaslighted, especially when it's more subtle. I'm going to share with you today some concrete examples that I've heard myself. Okay? Number one, I'm sure it was just a joke. It's not that serious. You're overreacting. Don't get so emotional. Are you sure that's what happened? Maybe it was subconscious. I don't see color. Racism no longer exists. That sounds like reverse racism. Not everything is about race. What I said wasn't racist. I'm not a racist, but stop playing the race card. This is not an all-encompassing list, don't get me wrong, but these are general rules of thumb that somebody, if they're using any of those phrases, you are probably experiencing racial gaslighting. Now, why is it so damaging to the Black, Indigenous, women of color? Why is it so damaging and toxic? Throughout history, women of color have had to deal with racial and gender discrimination. Not only that, but there are overwhelming amount of evidence to back up this fact. And the BIPOC women continue to feel its ripple effects. There's a study from Harvard that found that Black women who lived under Jim Crow's law, which legalized racial discrimination in the mid-1960s, led to negative health effects decades later. That's a lot of damage, a lot of discrimination for us as Black women to continue to face health risks due to discrimination. Now, as those studies show that racism and sexism negatively impact BIPOC women in their work environment, there's a Future firm, a survey that found that only 3% of the Black workers want to return to the office full-time following the pandemic, compared to the 21% of white workers in the US. Thanks to the experience of the unique people, thanks to discrimination, thanks to racial Gaslighting. And this is particularly women of color not returning. I remember having my hair touched one time, and someone touched it, and I was like, what are you doing? You know, it's a subtle way of gaslighting. Or asking, what are you eating? It smells weird. Another subtle way of gaslighting. These are just some of the things that make us not want to come back into the office. Because we have to try to respond appropriately in any of those situations, because then we're classed as the angry Black woman or the emotional woman or just downright BITCHs. As a woman of color, oftentimes you weigh the cost, the benefit analysis of addressing any of that. If you decide to confront a colleague, will they acknowledge their impact on you and how it harmed you? Probably not. Will you end up needing to take care of their emotions? Probably you have to explain that to them. So what impact will this conversation have in your working relationship, your working environment, or even your job? I could truly tell you this, that you will be classed as being racial, and the statements you make them uncomfortable. But on the flip side of that, remaining silent also results in emotional tax, which cost me and kept me silent. Reinforcing that you're not safe from this type of effect at work. And being able to speak about it, have a conversation about it, and be safe when you're talking about it is important. So you can imagine how frustrating gaslighting is in a regular relationship or situation. But think of it discriminatory as a woman and then a Black woman. Gaslighters belittle the other person, belittle the experiences of a BIPOC woman by suggesting that they're making these things up, that they don't matter, that they're not worth being responded to. Not only could this wreak havoc on mental health of the BIPOC woman, but also it could distract them from more important issues that still exist. When you've been discriminated against throughout your entire life, you can recognize it in an instant. It's like a sixth sense. So when people turn around and ask you to prove your reality, it's truly maddening. Workplace supervisors, executive directors, managers, anyone in authority that's supposed to lead other people, hear this. So, what can you do if you're being racially gaslighted? Experiencing racial gaslighting is exhausting and sometimes even traumatizing. I can truly tell you that. But fortunately, there are effective ways of combating this. Number one, you can do your research on what it is, what's really impacting you, what the effects are, what it looks like when you don't feel comfortable, when you don't feel good, when what you used to love turns sour and flip sides to something else that you don't even recognize. And then there's so much information on the internet that You can be provided resources to help you understand and recognize this behavior. And like I did my homework. I familiarized myself with these tactics, and it made me able to be prepared to respond and help me to gain control of the situation and of my life. Call them out on their toxic racist behaviors. When you're considering your response, be discerning. Your mental well being and protecting your energy is most important. How important is a relationship to you? It probably was not a relationship if your feelings, your mental health didn't matter. Address the situation. Now, if you don't feel comfortable enough to address the situation, you can just say, I see you have a different perspective, but I'm not imagining things. And if it persists, I feel like I'm not being heard. I'm stepping away from the conversation. And most likely you'll catch that person off guard that has the bad behavior, but it keeps the situation calm and it makes it polite. See, keeping your cool takes a lot of confidence. Sometimes you will get angry, but gain control and keep engaged with that hated argument. And you don't want it to escalate. So gain control and be confident of what you know to be true. You see, sometimes the gaslighter has had no intention of causing harm, but because of the privilege, and because it was allowed before with other women of color, they just continued it. I would have a conversation and keep using the word I statements to help the person understand the impact on you and be clear and straightforward. And then ask them to share the impact on them of what their understanding was on you. Did you understand what I said? Thirdly is document the evidence. Whatever it is, document it, journal it, email it to yourself, and make sure that it gets out of your head, out of your mouth, onto a piece of paper or email, because gaslighting eats away at your self-esteem. See, it made me feel confused and disoriented, but I kept journaling to help me take some control back. And I took off time to get control back. You can keep checking the version of the events and confirm that things actually happened the way you remember. Even if the gaslighter is telling you something different. Turn to family and friends for support. Talk about it. Get it out and don't isolate. That's the number one thing. Don't do that. And then what you could do is advocate for others. Be a support system and recognize that it's happening for others. If you're a person of privilege and there's an opportunity for you to lead, then do it. Seek to understand the experiences of others and believe that your colleagues, when they choose to share their experiences, be an anti-racist ally, not part of the problem. Get in sync with what you're really doing and what you're really saying. And then lastly, go to therapy. If you suspect gaslighting is happening, like myself, I suspected it, I felt it, I know it, and I went right away to the doctors. and got on a therapy regimen. And look for someone who understands racial gaslighting, not just gaslighting alone, but understands it. Seek a professional. Seek a professional who looks like you, or at least if they don't look like you, they understand you, because that gaslighting is real. And for the BIPOC woman, it's very toxic. This is Edna White. I hope today that you've gotten something out of today's message. And if you have any comments, click the link down below. And I'm offering you a free consultation with me. Thank you so much, and I'll see you real soon. Bye now.